Good afternoon, everyone. We will start in just a moment. I am having one hair of technical difficulties, but please do stick with us. Good afternoon, everyone. We will start in just a moment. I am having one hair of technical difficulties. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another conversation on Your Judaism. And today I am deeply excited and greatly honored to invite Joey Weisenberg to join us. Joey is the founder and director of Hadar's Rising Song Institute and is the author of Building Singing Communities and the Torah of Music, winner of a 2017 National Jewish Book Award. A devoted student and teacher of traditional Jewish melodies, Joey also composes new Nagonim that have moved and inspired Jews around the world. His seventh album with the Hadar ensemble, Songs of Ascent, was by Rising Song Records in 2019. And on a personal level, it is a deep joy and honor to invite Joey to this conversation. Joey and I have known each other since we were kids here in Milwaukee. He also married my cousin, Molly Weingrad. And the way family in Milwaukee works, that makes Joey and me cousins. So we've had the pleasure and blessing of joy and joy of celebrating life together. Our kids have spent time with each other. We visit each other when they lived in New York, when Joey and Molly lived in Philadelphia, here in Milwaukee. And we have taken many, many long walks, Joey and I, and have had many talks about Judaism, all of its possibilities and all of its adventures. And it is such a joy and an honor now to be able to have one of those conversations and to share Joey's wisdom and richness with everyone. So thank you all for joining. Joey, I am so grateful that you are taking up time to be here today.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor and pleasure to get to be on your show.
I appreciate it. How are you feeling today? How's your Monday treating you?
It's pretty good. It's a nice sunny day in Philadelphia. It's quite beautiful, and it's like the last hurrah of the fall.
Yeah. You're already looking toward the end of this time with lament, right? Yeah. It's hard to fully enjoy, but yeah, here in Milwaukee too, it's 76 degrees right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it is great. It is great. So thanks again for joining. Tell me a little bit about your Jewish life and your Jewish journey.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I grew up in Milwaukee, and in many ways, Milwaukee and all the things I learned there have really set the tone for what I've been able to learn further as I left Milwaukee when I was 18, 19. To go to New York and then to Philadelphia 14 years later. And I remember being I was a little bit younger than you, but we were amongst the crowd of kids who were running around and escaping from shul at Beth Israel in Milwaukee. And I think even during the escape from shul, there was a lot that was brought into who we are, and that we've both in our own ways have tried to rediscover for ourselves as we've gotten older. And I think what really has held me in the Jewish game has been the music. And the music has it's one of those situations like, okay, if the music is this good, then there must be something else to go along with this Jewish picture. And so, for me as an adult, it's been the process of really trying to both learn the music and also to try to understand what it's all about, and what's going on with it. And that's an unfolding process, that I imagine won't be resolved anytime soon.
So even as a kid, did you find that music was inspiring, that it connected you somehow, or were you trying to escape from that too? I know what you're talking about, Joey. We would be in the sanctuary because our parents forced us to be for part of the service, and then we'd have to go to the bathroom, and we'd be gone for a couple of hours throughout services, right? But at that point, was the music somehow a connecting point, or even at that point, were you kind of away from everything because that's what it means to be a kid?
Yeah, well, it's so sweet. I love getting to talk with you because you actually know what I'm talking about. But there were some parts of the shul growing up that were musically magical, and Cantor Carrie Cohn was an amazing singer and brought a lot of heart to the davening, even if I wasn't necessarily totally ready to absorb that at that point. But it's something that stuck with me and that I've recognized the older I get, like, oh, that's what he was putting into that, that thing called heart.
Yeah.
And also that he was a teacher of the community who taught me and a lot of other people how to lead and how to learn Torah. Like the combination of not only being somebody who's able to do the thing, but also somebody who wants to pass it on and to give over the tradition, both technically and also with its heart. That's something I've really appreciated about Cantor Cohn. And there were a few other characters in the shul who really inspired me musically. One was a fellow by the name of Joseph Pick. And Joseph Pick was an old... he seemed, when I was little, he seemed ancient, but he's probably just a normal guy.
But it's artist now, right?
Just the sweetest person. He had a European lilt to his voice, which I've heard was from Frankfurt, although I should confirm that. And I would sit in front of him in shul, and I'd listen to the way he'd sing along, or sometimes he'd be singing totally different from everybody else. Sometimes he would, but he had this beautiful lilt to his singing. I just remember, and he'd sing with the Ashkenazis pronunciation, and I just remember that feeling of being in front of him and not really knowing what he was doing, but kind of feeling it was a little bit magical. Wow. And that sound, that feeling, he had a big smile too, and he'd get up to Lane to read Torah, and I remember just that sound and that feeling, and so yeah, those were some things that were really sweet.
Wow, thank you for sharing all that. So as you reflect back about the hold that music came to have on you and its centrality in your Jewish life, and certainly in your life as well, was there like a moment at some point, or just an incident where, like that aha moment, that this is what I want to explore in my adult life? Or was it more like a magical magnolia that kind of just bloomed short, a little bit at a time, and at some point you just couldn't help but see the beautiful flower that had grown and you ran with it?
That's such a nice, nice image. Wow. I tend to think of, the way that I think of things is much more on sort of the slow, steady incline model as opposed to like the rapid ascent version of Jewish life, which is more of like a Baal Tshuva type of path. And my path has never been meteoric rise. It's been like slow, long-term development, which I hope will go on forever, as new questions are asked. Yeah, but I'd say it got started in high school. So I started going across town because I was interested in this young woman who lived across town, and by the name of Molly Weingrad. And she was part of a community of the Twersky Hasidic community, and which my grandfather was also a part of, because my grandfather was sort of belonged to all the shuls in town and was kind of a fan of everybody. and but among those, he was a very close friends with the Twersky family. And so between my grandfather and my future wife, I had this impulse to go out to the west side. And when I got out there, I found that the singing was like, if there were hints of it at the conservative shul where we had grown up, out there was a full-fledged operation. It's just like every moment at the table where a nigun could be. Could come into being, it would take off. It was just super beautiful with harmonies and very rich, and just for me at that time was super magical. And I was growing up, had a different musical path, which was being a blues guitar player in Milwaukee.
Oh,
so when I was
I didn't know that.
when I was 12 and 13, I was playing in bars and smoky, disgusting places in Milwaukee. I don't know for the life of me how my parents ever let me do that, but across town in Milwaukee, on the west side where the Twerskys were singing and doing their version of Jewish life, the feeling was as intense as in the blues bars. Totally, like a totally different types of attitudes on life, but like the same depth of feeling. This kind of passionate expression that bubbled up out of the gut and out of the heart, and emerged in beautiful notes. And again, like, it was music that wasn't like, as they say, sophisticated or clean. Like blues and the world of nigun. It's not about being perfect. It's just about letting the essence of your being emerge from you. And that was, something that I felt in what claimed to be very holy places and what claimed to be very unholy places. Found kind of a similar spirit. And that was on display for me as a teenager in Milwaukee, and I was glad to get to experience that.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that about you, that you were a blues guitarist at such a young age of performing. So
yeah.
you mentioned, I'm nigun once in the introduction. You mentioned it twice. I know how I would define it, but I'm much more interested to hear how you would define it. Not just for me to learn, but there might be people here who aren't familiar with that term as well. So what is a nigun?
Yeah, nigun in Hebrew and nigun in Yiddish. It's a melody that has no words, and these are usually very old melodies, at least hundreds of years old. Although there's some that are emerging in every moment. I've been lucky to capture some new Nagonum, some new melodies. Typically, they sometimes take on words. So you might sing, Odi Shama Bare Yehuda Uvechutzos Yerushalayim. Right, let there be singing in the streets. Let us hear the sounds of the bride and groom, etc. Sometimes the words come into being, but ultimately then the words get left behind, and it's just di-di-di-dam, ay-di-di-di-di-di-di-di, oh-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, ay-da-di-da-da-di-da, oh-do-do-do, ay-di-da-da-da-di-da, di-di-da-di-da-do-dum, di-da-da-da-do-do-di-dum, di-di-di-da-da-dim-bum. Right, so eventually the way that it works is you can't express, even as amazing as poetry and prayers and the written text is, there comes a point where words can't express anymore what we're trying to get across in terms of prayer or in terms of artistic expression, and you just leave them behind, and you just and you just take off it with pure music. That's what a Nigun is all about. Yeah.
I have to confess that no small part of me wants to leave right now this podcast so that you can just sing Nagonum for people for hours and hours on end. So maybe we'll set a time to do that another time because we're here for a conversation. But please know that I'm just so captivated even by the hint of the Nigun that you shared, and I think it just comes through even just in that sharing how this has really inspired your life journey and your Jewish journey. So thank you for sharing that, Joey.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome. I also know, at least I think I remember that look, a lot of times when people kind of go on a journey, they talk about a spiritual journey, a mental journey, an emotional journey. Your journey, I think, was also geographic, right? So to learn about Niganim, to learn about singing and music in connection with Judaism. So if you're comfortable sharing a few words about that, I'd love to hear more.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of moving around. Do you just mean in terms of places that I've gone to explore music, or yeah. I mean, I will say that travel is not essential for discovering the richness of the world and what it has to offer. It is always right there, no matter where you are. So just to say, like, taking in one breath and looking at the trees is basically as rich as anything can get, and at the same time, the Jewish path has all of these different traditions, and so when you go from place to place, you can sometimes understand more about where you came from. So yeah, for me, going from as a late teenager to New York was a way of connecting in with a place where there are just millions of Jews who have a very rich tradition of lots of different rich traditions that all come together in that one place. And yet there's some things that I could never find in New York that were on full display in Milwaukee. Just the richness of being at a table with the Twerskis, for example, singing Nagonum it has never been beat by any hoity-toity spot on the East Coast. It's like there's riches everywhere, and many of the greatest moments of Jewish life have happened in very small places. Many of the greatest books have been written in small shtetls across Eastern Europe. The greatest thinkers came from small places, not only from Warsaw or from the large cities. So I did spend a fair amount of time in Eastern Europe trying to meet old gypsy musicians who. There weren't a lot of Jewish musicians left in Eastern Europe when I was there in the early 2000s, but there were a bunch of gypsy musicians, and many of them, or the oldest of them, had played with Jewish musicians before the war. And so it was fun to go up into the mountains and find these musicians and ask them to play Jewish melodies for me. And there used to be these extensive traditions of Jewish and gypsy musicians who would work together, and they would play music all over. They kept traveling and playing for each other's weddings, basically. And both of those groups kept getting kicked out of everywhere that they were. And so hence, it's like the wandering Jew was really quite literal for so many Jews for so many generations. And what was nice about that was that they got to pick up a lot of ideas from a lot of different people and a lot of different places. So there's this very rich mosaic of you can hear it in the music, and you can hear it in Jewish concepts and ideas. Just a lot of influences from a lot of places. And I think ultimately what's interesting to me is that no matter how much you travel or how many different places, I've had in the last 15 years had the privilege of visiting hundreds of Jewish communities all over the world, and getting to sing with them and play music with them, and just understand how different communities all across the Jewish spectrum operate, and so you get to sort of be a tourist in that way. But ultimately, for all of us, we have to figure out what any of this means to each of us individually, which is not a tourist option. It's which I know is part of your work. We have to actually identify what are the things that are resonant in particular to us, and that takes a lot of time and willingness to take some risks and be critical, and also to embrace things that are beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. So I want to follow up both on what's meaningful and relevant, what resonates for you, and also some of the risks that you've taken. I do want to share that something jumped into mind as you were talking about the beautiful amalgamated music between gypsies and Jews, and how all these kind of like different musics came together to form something beautiful. Whether it was intentional or not, it kind of sounded a little bit of a metaphor for your own journey too, right? That you've picked from Beth Israel, the conservative synagogue here in Milwaukee, from the Torah, the Hasidic melody here, from New York, from the East Coast, from all of these different places. So it sounds like from blues guitar, right, that you've taken all of these different steps along your path too, and they've kind of come together and formed this just beautiful development for you. So I don't know if it was intentional, but that was just something that popped into my mind as you were sharing about the gypsies and the Jews together.
That's how it is for all of us. I mean, for all of us, we go through life and we pick up different ideas along the way from different people. And whether we want to or not, it all becomes a grand mushel, as my grandfather used to say, a big mix-up.
Yep.
And it can be, that means that there's change and development throughout the generations, for better or worse.
Right. Yeah. So you threw out a couple of words toward the end of what you were sharing. I think you used the word resonate. You also used the word risk. The language that I tend to use is meaningful and relevant. So if you're comfortable following up, what is meaningful and relevant to you about Judaism? What resonates with you now as an adult about Judaism? Or what are some of the risks that you've taken to get yourself where you are?
Yeah. Well, it's very, that's a huge question. I appreciate the opening. I think depending on where you come from in Jewish life, something that's a major risk for one person is totally standard for somebody else. Mm-hmm. It can be risky to declare yourself Jewish. It can be risky to study old tradition. It doesn't seem risky, but it is compared to, basically Jewish life itself is profoundly countercultural. In many ways. Among them, that it says that God has no physical body. In a world where we are overwhelmed with the material world, to say, hey, the material world is not really the essential, the defining characteristic here of what we're going for. It's very countercultural, as countercultural today as it's ever been. And so if you come from a world that's heavily which is much of America, for example, which is highly ensconced in the material pursuit, it can be risky to start exploring other ways of engaging, and it can be risky to open your mouth and to sing. It can be risky to open your mouth and to say a prayer, right? It can be risky to try to attempt to learn and engage in old traditions, and then it can also be risky once you're fluent in those old traditions to let them go. It can be risky to at every level of the development of a person, there's risks that have to be taken to get to the next place, and so that's the truth with engaging with Jewish ideas. Like, I just happened to look at the Siddur, which is open to a random page in front of me, for the Shabbat prayer Nishmat Kol Chai, and which means that the neshama of all, the soul of all life is giving a bracha, is giving a blessing, that the breath of all life is constantly bringing forth its song, bringing forth its prayer. It's like to let Jewish prayers, and this is one of the most lauded prayers of all. It's even a Shabbat song, Menucha v'Simcha, that says, what's cool about Shabbat? We get to sing Nishmat Kol Chai.
You get to sing about singing. Yeah.
Not only that, but not Aritzacha.
Yes.
But it's a profound statement, especially in the time we're in right now. We're a very divisive time, and if the cycle of goes from divisiveness to a feeling of unity and togetherness, we're, especially at this particular moment in United States time, we're in a very divisive time. And to have a prayer that says, hey, actually we're all of us, and not just us, but all the animals of the field and all of the birds of the sky and all of the oceans and mountains and valleys are all singing our songs, and we're all trying to offer our prayers, and that, to be able to see the world that way is something that takes years to develop, and it's not obvious, even if it's kind of beautiful on the spot,
Yeah.
So. Yeah, those are things that resonate with me about the tradition, but it takes risks to get there. You have to put yourself out a little bit there, and you have to wade through all the people who want to make fun of you, for being too, fill in the blank. You have to wade through, like, if you're in the world of Brooklyn artists or something, where it's all about being cynical and sardonic and ironic, and where it's thought that artists are the ones who are really always making critiques of the system, and that it has to always be undercutting something, and the religious message is trying to say, unfortunately, it's almost always used for the same purposes, which, oftentimes it does undercut everybody else. But these what the Siddur, what the prayer book is actually saying, like right there, is that we have to overcome our sense of irony and our sense of sarcasm. And that's not easy for me, and it's not. But to be able to see something straightforward, and to just be able to see the beauty of something.
So there are a lot of profound things you said there. There are two that I wanted to reflect back on, if that's okay. The first is when you were talking about Nishmat Kol Chai, right? The prayer that we kind of use to introduce the bulk, the central part of the morning services on Shabbat, on Saturday morning. Nishmat Kol Chai Tevarech et Shimcha. Usually when the rabbis or when Judaism talks about the neshama, about the soul, usually that is something that's reserved for people, right? The idea within the rabbinic mindset traditionally is that people have souls, and in some ways that's what distinguishes people from animals Certainly the animals have lifeblood, and that's their essence, which is why, according to the traditional laws of kashrut, of keeping kosher, of dietary laws, we don't eat the blood of animals. But I love how you looked at the neshama, at the soul, as something that is not nishmat kol chai, every human being that is supposed to sing praise to God, that's supposed to sing praise and let their music come. But it's really every being, every living being, right? If it's, and this is what you were saying, and it really resonated with me, right? That it's people, it's animals, it's trees, it's oceans you were talking about. So I love how you were looking at the idea of every living being being the just everything coming together that's part of this world. And I think you're right, that is not that's not intrinsic, and that's not instinctual for a lot of people, because you said it's for you, in many ways, it was a multi-year journey getting there. So thank you for bringing all that
lifetime.
I
had a teacher who, a very strict old cantor, who's never said a good word to me. The best thing he ever said was, "Well, that didn't irritate me too much." And every year I call him up and say, thank you for all the stuff you taught me. I really appreciate it. I got to sing a lot of it this year on the high holidays or whatever. And he says, "So how did it go for you?" And I said, "Hey, it went okay. Give me another few years and I'll probably get it together." And he says, "For you, 40." And but the thing is that every year he still says, "For you, 40."
Yep.
Right. And so there's the sense that it's always yet out there to actually chop, to actually grab. Yeah, this same prayer we're on, Nishma Kol Chai, the next verse is V'ruach Kol Basar. It talks the breath, that the wind that comes through every piece of flesh. Yep. This is my grandmother, Toni Ettenheim, that was her worst insult for a person, was that you were a shtickel Fleisch mit Eigen, a piece of meat with eyes.
Wow.
Right, but again, even the worst insults in the Jewish language have a sense of reality to them, which is that we all are just that. Right? It's pretty much. But even in this prayer, by the end, it gets quite graphic about all of the different parts of us that are singing and giving praise. It's our klayot, our innards, our guts, and it's our atzamot, our bones. All of the deepest, most inner essence of our beings is just yearning to call out beyond our fleshness. Right? It's to just to reach out and merge with the sort of interconnected whole, which is what we call God. Right? And it's not only us, because just in another moment or so in the prayer it says there's all these other levels. There's the angels who are singing, and there's the who are singing their prayers and their praises, and there's the tzaddikim and the chasidim and all the sort of imagined righteous people who are singing their prayers. And then it gets down to our level, and this is the prayer called Shochenad, which comes next. And it says Uvama kalot rivavot amcha beis Yisrael, where it says the people who get together, the choirs who assemble, the gatherings of us who get to. We're not quite at those high levels, but we are doing our best to offer our songs, to offer our prayers. Even in our state of flesh and bones.
Thank you. So all of this comes through, all of this that resonates so powerfully within you, the music, the interconnection between people, animals, angels, oceans, everything comes through so clearly. But you also talk about risks, right? That everyone has risks in life. Anytime you want to do anything that's even a little bit out of the proverbial box, there's a bit of a risk. And you were talking about that And a lot of your Jewish path you have purposefully directed that would be in many ways far out of that proverbial box. So where did you get the courage? Where did you find the strength to take those risks?
Well, I think to some degree I came by it honestly. I grew up with my mother, Nancy Ettenheim, was somebody who's willing to call a spade a spade. Somebody who's willing to say, look, we could probably do better here. And my dad is somebody who likes to dream, and Bob Weisenberg, he likes to imagine what something could be. And I would say, my grandfather Milt Ettenheim belonged to a lot of shuls, as I mentioned, in Milwaukee, and I think what I learned from him was not only that. I mean, I know on the one hand, it was just a mechanism for not showing up at shul. You were always at the other shul, but the deeper lesson that I think I took from his participation in a lot of different worlds was that there's a lot to learn from everybody, and I think he really believed that there's a lot to. That he spent something like 40 years in the Twersky, being a sort of quasi adherent of the Twerskys, and then when he was 84 he went back to the Reform Temple Emmanuel, and he reported to me, he said Yossala, he says, this is the emes. He said, this is the truth. Right. And so, for the last 2 years of his life, he went back to the shul where he had grown up, and just seeing these kinds of trajectories of journeys of a person, and the willingness to step outside of a box to learn something new, the willingness to step back into a box, because you realize after a journey that there's truth in what you knew in the first place, but you couldn't see it yet. And those are sort of my role models from being a kid of what it means to explore and to not be satisfied, to try to give something a good shot, but also to be willing to walk away from it, and also just as bravely to walk back to it. For many of us, walking away is hard, and walking back in is just as hard. And that's I don't know where I got the courage, but I think that it's been on display for me, to try to follow that path.
I love how you're talking about a path in non-geometric terms, right? Because a lot of times when you talk about a path, you talk about a linear path, trying to go from here to here, right? And sometimes you get a little bit lost and you go off the path and then you come back. But even in Judaism, we talk about halacha, right, which is colloquially Jewish law, but it's the path, right? But you're talking a lot about a path is non-geometric. It's not going from point A to point B. It's not necessarily direct. It's not circular. It's not just like always going back and forth, but there's something entirely amorphous, almost like a blob. That's the path, right? That you kind of go in and out. And they're also bringing up challenges that a lot of times when you go on your own path, as much courage as it takes to forge on your own in the first place, there's a lot of courage sometimes going back to where you came from, right? Maybe it's a sense of I made a mistake, that was the wrong path. Or maybe it's a sense I turned my back. Maybe there's a feeling of shame. Maybe there's a feeling of I'm not welcome here anymore. So, there's a lot of courage kind of walking in this blob of a journey rather than the linear path. So I love how you shape this in very non-geometric terms.
Yeah, it's always been, it's one of those things that's really funny to me. It's in Brooklyn, there's a kind of revolving door in the super Orthodox world where you have, you have all these people who have just discovered Hasidus, or have just discovered what they're really excited about, and like a stricter path that they can follow. And so they're all on their way in. And then right on the other side, there's another door which is opened, and there's all these people who are flowing right on out. And when you look at that picture and you meet enough people on both sides, and you try to think about which ones of them are funny and which ones of them aren't, and which ones of them are, there's brilliance in both and risk in both directions. And so it's never been clear to me that one direction, the door in or the door out, is more profound or more right. What has been clear to me is that it's helpful when there's discussion, and when you get to learn from all of these, from everybody. And that almost everybody has a pretty interesting and good perspective. And nobody's really right. In fact, I would contend that nobody really knows what they're talking about at all.
Yep.
We're all just scrambling around trying to find our way home, and we can't, because home is in some ways nowhere to be found. And I think it's that's sort of the essence of the quality of wandering, which we've been in as a people for thousands of years. I wish it was easier than that.
Do you?
Do you? I do. I wish that there was a place, even given a Jewish homeland, so to speak, that we currently have some say in. It's still, there's, for me, I have not, even with my family having been in Milwaukee since before the Civil War, in some cases, and in other cases, some of the rest of my family had, like my grandmother had been born in Germany before and was a refugee, and we bring with us a sense of placelessness, and it's not that comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a little plaque hung up on my living room wall, just right over there, which says, "Not all who wander are lost." Right. So yeah, maybe there is something beautiful and powerful in the wandering. Certainly, Jews, if you look at the Torah, if you look at the Bible, have a long history of wandering as well. But there's a lot of power in that wandering too. So not to suggest that you're done wandering, not to suggest that your journey is over, because you would never say that. You made it very clear that this is an ongoing journey, that there's ongoing adventure in continuing to learn and grow in Judaism. But if you could reflect on your Jewish life as it is right now, anything in particular of which you're particularly proud, that jumps out to you, that feels uniquely grounded or centered, that I don't know where my path is going to take me, but this feels like a stop right now that I will carry with me forever.
Well, it has been really interesting with COVID. I don't know, some of you are watching this now, some of you might be watching it in 5 years when COVID-19 is a thing of the past. But right now we're in a situation where COVID has been a very disruptive force in many of the patterns that we've had. And like any disruptive force, it's been also a great opportunity in its own way. So we've Jewishly, my family and I, it's been very very special to, in some ways, to not have. There's been no shul for 8 months. We have had no place to go. Instead, we have been able to go outside and walk into the woods and daven and sing. And in some ways, I'm not sure we would ever go back. So it's like, it's been a very, with all love of our community and our shul, it's it's like, it's been very sweet to have the time with the family, for children, and to just get to be together without too much pressure, and to let go of some of the things, the very things that we were trying so hard to uphold, and to take a breath and say, oh, okay, so there's that thing, and then there's this whole other way. Yeah, I find that to be kind of precious right now.
Wow. I'm imagining you and Molly and your 4 kids somewhere out in some woods, and that's Shmat Kol Chai, isn't it? Right? It's the breath of all living beings. That's the prayer that you referenced toward the beginning of our conversation. So it seems like you're really living this Nishmat Kol Chai.
Yeah, it's hard to get through the Psalms, there used to be a piece of every Siddur that was called Perek Shira, which was a collection of verses that were sung by all of the different forces in the universe. The birds, the eagles, the frogs, they all had their song. For some reason, that's fallen away from Siddurim. I think as Jews began to congregate more and more in cities, they found less and less need for it. Like the only thing that's ever been dropped from a Siddur was like this particularly beautiful set of passages.
Siddurim about how much can you pack into it, not what can you pull away from it.
But yeah, just to get to be outside. For the thing is that all we're doing is realizing a truth that most people know anyway, which is that it sure is nice to be outside on a Saturday morning.
Yes. I want to name something that you put out there, which is powerful. And you talked about COVID as a disruptive force, but you're putting out something else that's a really potentially destructive force within traditional, organized, institutional Judaism. And we're not going to talk too much about it now because I know we're running out of time. And it's something that you and I talked about on some of those walks that I mentioned in the introduction. That you're wondering, what's it good for yourself? You're saying, I don't know if my path is going to be able to fully take me back to the shul, right, to the synagogue experience. And not that there's something necessarily bad or wrong about it. Maybe there is. But I've had this opportunity to experience Judaism with my family in such a different way, and there's something so alive about it for you that I don't think you're intending to cause a polemic against institutional synagogues. I'm a rabbi. I'm the half-time rabbi of a synagogue right now, but I know that you and I are aligned in wondering what forms does Judaism need to take as we're moving forward, and for better or for worse. I think I'd argue for better, despite the messiness that's going to come up. COVID has kind of put that question in the public sphere of Judaism. At least I think it should. And within the synagogue world, within the rabbinic world, within the Jewish world, what does Judaism look like now? So you're putting it out there, you're naming it. I don't think we're going to solve it. And certainly if we do, it's not going to be the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, I lost you there.
We're still there? There we go. It's a powerful challenge and opportunity for Judaism in 2020 as we hopefully soon and safely emerge out of this COVID world.
Yeah, it is. And I think, the good news is that large institutions like synagogues is a relatively modern concept. Jews have been getting together in minyans and small groups to daven for thousands of years, as Rabbi Eli Confer at Hadar has taught me. The minyan is a very old concept. The shul is a relative newcomer. The sort, especially the gargantuan model, and there's something amazing about large groups of, myriads of Jews being all in the same place. And also there's something that is passivity inducing about that. And when there's enough generations go by where people are sitting there watching something and not having a chance to bring themselves into it, like with authority for their, then it can actually sap the energy of the very movements that it was, the way the movements were actually designed. So the disruptive force comes in and says, and reminds people that, okay, nobody is going to tell you exactly what to do right now. You might have to actually think.
Yeah.
You might have to come up with your own idea in this of what to do. You might have to learn a new skill that you didn't have before. And the result is actually, the best outcome could be that there's a whole new sense of empowerment, that people can reclaim their own ability to engage and ask questions and to be a part of the tradition, really in some ways on their own terms. That to me is an exciting possibility, and that's really kind of my prayer for COVID, is that it from the Jewish community point of view, is that it actually gives people the opportunity for empowerment.
I will confess now that there is a good chance that I am shamelessly and blatantly going to plagiarize what you just said there. Right? Because when I talk about own your Judaism and owning your Judaism, this is what I mean, right? This is exactly what I mean. There's a better chance that I will use your words and give you credit, right? Because Judaism teaches it basically, if you cite your sources, you bring redemption to the world. So, thank you for that powerful framing of what it, right? That this is now an opportunity for Jews as individuals and even for Jews in community to try to reclaim a Judaism that feels meaningful and relevant, that feels authentic to them. And maybe the blessing out of COVID from a Jewish perspective, or even from a broader perspective, is religion aside. We've all been forced in a very uncomfortable way to kind of reflect, who am I? What am I? What do I want to be? What's essential to me? And Judaism is certainly not only is Judaism not immune from those conversations, but I think we'd agree that the tapestry of Judaism will be fully enriched if we take seriously those reflective questions. Any other, we've just got a couple moments left, so before I offer my genuine thanks and appreciation, anything else on your heart or mind that you want to share?
Well, just to say that given that you live in Milwaukee and I come from Milwaukee, and just to express also my appreciation to all of our teachers, who at the Milwaukee Jewish Day School, at program, at various places that both of us had the chance to learn in some cases work in, but I just had an email with my Hebrew teacher and Judaica teacher Adina Altshul just earlier today, and just to speaking of coming full circle, just helping to realize how much we depend on all of the goodness that we were given in those places, and so thank you.
You are. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful kind of inclusio. I actually saw Adina and Harvey in December. I was in Israel with my kids in December, so I went to go visit Adina and Harvey, so I saw them. But you mentioned Adina, you mentioned Cantor Cohen, you mentioned Rabbi Tversky, you mentioned so many of the teachers that you've had along the way, and that you can learn from those kind of walking in, those walking out. So it's a beautiful inclusio that Judaism, in Pirkei Avot, we learn, Ezehu Chacham halomed mikol adam. Who is the wise person? The one who learns from everyone. So thank you, Joey, for modeling that, for sharing all of that. Thank you for being my teacher as well. I know, I love all of our walks and our talks and our conversations. And just like today, I always learn so much from you and from your wisdom. So thank you for being my teacher, my friend. If it doesn't, hopefully you don't take it as an insult, because I have a title, but thanks for being my colleague. Thanks for being my chavruta. So thank you very much. Just being such a rich and important part of my life. And thank you to everyone also who's listening. And we have a few comments here, which to everyone who is listening and commenting, and your mom, by the way, has been listening too. I don't know if you're seeing the comments.
I haven't seen the comments yet, but I'm just also even before, for many years before COVID, you've been doing some work in Milwaukee of trying to reimagine ways of interacting with Jewish tradition, and I just find that really exciting. so keep up the work.
I appreciate it. So I'm not sure that you and I are going to solve all of the Jewish issues and figure out what is next and best for Judaism. I think I love that we're both trying, and I love that we're both learning from each other and sharing with each other. But if nothing else, I certainly know that with everything that you've contributed to Judaism, we will certainly have beautiful music and Nagonum carrying us through as we continue on our journey. So Joey, thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, looking forward to next time.
Great. Thanks. Me too.